Welcome. We've got a class for us today where we're going to be enjoying balance, finding balance within our bodies and finding balance within our nervous systems. So you'll need props. If you've got them to hand, you can always use a yoga strap and a yoga block. If you don't have a yoga strap and yoga block, you're welcome to grab anything. I suggest sometimes a tea towel, even if that's if you're at home, a tea towel or a cord from your dressing gown. Pile of books is also helpful if you don't have a block or a brick. So anything that you can adapt your practice, make sure you've got blankets and a cushion to be able to support you in your sitting postures. And we'll begin lying down on our backs. So just coming down to the floor, finding feet flat on the floor, knees bent. And just allowing the spine to rest fully on the mat. And that will be connecting from the back of the skull through the arch up through the back of the neck, and then allowing space between the shoulder blades to start to settle, allowing a little exhale to come to soften through the back of the ribs, and letting the lumbar spine begin to relax and release. Allowing the sacrum to really settle. So just beginning to arrive, you might like to take 3 deep breaths in through the nose and then out through the mouth. In through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And one more deep breath in and exhale. So just beginning to settle, taking the time here to really arrive. Noticing all the areas in contact with the floor, from the back of the skull, through the back of shoulders, rib cage, down through the back of the pelvis, and across the feet. So from the heels all the way to the toes, really starting to notice lengthening of the toes from the front of the ankle all the way out to the tip of the toes and beyond. So just really starting to wriggle the toes now. Just bring them to life, bring a bit of warmth in here, starting to bring a little movement. You might like to wriggle and roll the ankles, maybe lifting the heels, planting down through the feet now, just rolling the heels and the ankles, changing the direction. And then just bringing a bigger stretch into the body as we reach the arms above us, taking a nice deep breath in. We might even find a yawn and then exhaling, relaxing. So we're looking at balance and our foundation postures today. So we'll be working through some standing postures, just here on the floor. See if we can take the feet and take the time to really play with where you want to place the feet. So finding that really stable place where all 4 corners of the feet feel in contact. Your arms are reaching above you. And now we're just going to exhale and allow the feet to drop through the floor. And as the feet drop through the floor, the pelvis gently lifts up. And then we're inviting the arms here to become a little looser. So hovering the arms off the floor. They don't have to be resting on the floor. Just allowing yourself to start to explore what it feels like to bring some movement from the fingertips through the palms of the hands, all the way through the elbows and into the shoulders. And so you're just gently loosening off. And once you've loosened off, see if you can settle from the wrists down through the elbows and into the shoulders, and just let everything settle. So it's almost like the hands are feeding back into the shoulders and the shoulder blades can rest. So the heart softens. And there's a sense that maybe the back of the rib cage can soften a little more, so the pelvis just sort of floats and hangs out almost like in a hammock between the upper body, the thoracic kind of spine region, and the knees kind of at the other end. And the pelvis is kind of free to float. And then maybe the pelvis drops back down, you can rub the hands together, creating a little bit of warmth in the palms of the hands, just placing them over the eyes, and just letting that weight of the forearms and the palms just rest onto the forehead. So we're really starting to settle in with some nice deep breaths here, taking a breath in through the nose, and just sighing it out through the mouth. letting the shoulders soften and relax. And again, a deep inhalation. So a nice deep breath and then a soft, long exhale. So the body really begins to arrive. Know what it feels like to feel a sense of gravity and weightedness through the whole of the torso, pelvis and spine. Peeling the heels of the hands up, just beginning to roll the wrists and wake up the hands. We're just going to draw the knees in towards the chest and take the hands onto the knees, crossing at the ankles and just letting yourself now rock from side to side. So little boat pose. Just allowing the head and the neck to rest, letting the shoulders relax, release, and allowing that little bobbing kind of sense of movement through the pelvis, and then maybe inviting a little bit more movement through the upper back as you rock from side to side. Massaging the sacrum, starting to really bring awareness into the back body as you undulate and roll from side to side. Letting the weight of the head go. Let the head and the neck soften, let the facial expression release. So just letting go of any part of the day before this point, just arriving fully in your bodies with your breath, softening and relaxing. Good, and then when you're ready, you can gently uncross the ankles, place your feet back onto the floor, and we're going to begin by finding another bridge pose. So just letting the heels drop through the floor, letting feet rest through the floor, maybe lifting the toes and spreading them so that all four corners of the feet feel really in contact with the floor. And then finding your way up into a nice fluid bridge pose shape. You can reach the arms out behind you and start to elongate both sides of the waist and explore what it feels like to open up this bridge pose. So we're not just simply pressing the pelvis up towards the sky, we're keeping a sense of kind of fluidity and openness, bringing that awareness of the breath into the spine. So just letting the spine undulate and the rib cage begin to open and expand on the inhalation. And then exhaling, condensing back to center. Good. Okay, so resting again, pelvis back on the floor. And then gently rolling over to one side. So we're just going to find our way onto all fours and welcoming ourselves into a few cat-cows. So as we exhale, spreading the fingertips, pressing down through the tops of the feet as the tailbone draws back towards the spine. Sorry, the tailbone draws down towards the floor as the belly button draws back towards the spine. And we find that arching through the upper back. And then as you come through the other way, see if you can invite a little more space between the vertebrae and the upper back. So we're not just dropping the belly towards the floor and then drawing the crown of the head and the tailbone up. We're inviting the rib cage to travel forward. So we're finding length through this cow pose as the heart draws through the upper arm bones and then broadening across the sit bones. Exhaling and rounding out, drawing belly button back towards the spine. Allowing the hands to rest through the floor as the shoulder blades glide over the rib cage. Good, so just finding your breath and allowing the movement now to feel really intuitive. So just take your time, it doesn't matter what it looks like. See if you can feel into movements through the spine. You might like to take your spine around as if your torso is in a barrel and you're just taking the rib cage around the inside of the barrel, touching all of the sides. Seeing if you need a little bit more time in one space, taking the time to really enjoy, to loosen off and to come into those areas that you might not have felt today, or that are just feeling tension and maybe haven't felt good for a while. So see if you can invite more breath, more letting go, more softening into those spaces. Letting the head and the neck relax and release as we start to warm up with nice circular kind of movements. Grounding through all four corners now, coming back to center so the spine is in neutral. The head and neck are in line with the shoulders and the sacrum. And then we're just going to tuck our tailbone tuck our toes and drop our pelvis back towards our heels, reaching our fingertips forwards. So a little active child's pose, just waking up the soles of the feet here, reaching through the fingertips, taking a deep breath in and exhaling, softening and relaxing. Deep breath in and exhaling and releasing. And then we're going to inhale, gently lift the upper body and come back towards on all fours. And from here, we're going to press through the hands, draw the belly button back towards the spine and reach the tailbone, the sit bones back behind us as we hover the knees a couple of inches off the floor. And then bringing them up, we're unfolding the lower half of the body to place the heels towards the floor. Maybe just taking a moment to pedal the heels, finding our way into our first downward facing dog. Allowing the arms and the hands to really kind of drop through the floor as the sit bones draw up and back, lengthening through the spine, letting the shoulders roll a little so we're not introducing too much tension. If your wrists come a little bit stiff and held, start to open up the wrists by releasing the hands and just taking one at a time, letting the hands go and then placing them back down so they form that sort of stable, grounded front half of the body, and then the lower half of the body can start to pedal the heels and then land the heels down as we exhale, open up through the back of the legs. And then we're going to walk our fingers towards our toes. So coming into a nice deep forward fold. Finding the head and the neck releasing. You can take the hands onto opposite elbows and allow yourself to sway a little. So a nice big soft bend in the the knees, and just let everything relax. So the torso is resting onto the thighs. A few deep breaths here. And then we're just going to let go, release the arms, and let the arms draw along the mat. So bending and hinging, sweeping the fingertips forwards and up and coming into our first chair pose. So drawing the belly button back towards the spine to tuck the tailbone to allow that sense of sitting down through the chair whilst the crown of the head reaches nice and tall. So a nice active chair pose. We can start to take the weight between one foot and the other and find a little loosening off here. So taking the space between the fingertips, creating a bit more space by taking the hands a little wider. So we don't have to scrunch the shoulders up around the ears. And if your arms become a little tired, it's absolutely fine. It feels more comfortable. You can take the hands out in front of you, keeping the elbows nice and light. We want to loosen off the upper back. So finding a way to always come back to undoing tension. And finding a way of being in a challenging posture without holding our breath. So just finding the chair as we sit a little deeper, dropping down into the heels, spreading the toes, lifting tall through the crown of the head. And then we're going to exhale, fold forwards into our forward fold, deep bend in the knees. I'm just going to flow a little bit here, so you're just going to pad your hands forwards and walk into downward facing dog. So we're going to find a nice little movement through the heels and the ankles. And then when we're ready, you can come towards a little bit more stillness. So just letting the feet rest. Okay, and then we're just going to drop the knees back down to the floor, find our way into our child's pose again, with the toes tucked. So just letting the head rest towards the floor, and if it doesn't come to the floor, that's absolutely fine. You can put a soft bend into the elbows. And you can tuck or untuck the toes. And again, just softening here. So we're really starting to let the nervous system start to become quieter and more relaxed with deeper, longer breaths. Just soothing with a nice soft breath in and a nice soft breath out. And then inhaling, we're just just going to come back up to centre and find our way into our chair pose again via downward facing dog. So just drawing the knees up, finding your way into downward facing dog, unhinging the hips. So there's a sense of the tailbone drawing up and away from the wrists. And then we're going to walk fingertips back towards toes, sweeping the fingertips forwards and sitting down into chair. Lifting the arms towards the sky. Seeing if we can find a nice deep chair pose, as deep as feels okay for you today. So it might be that you're standing in a more upright position. If we can come a little bit deeper and start to really fire up the legs, squeezing the sit bones together to create that sense of engagement through the pelvis, lifting tall through the crown of the head. So we're starting to really connect to that sense of central line, the connection of our core and how that can lift through the crown of the head. And as we ground through the feet, we're now going to take the weight into the left foot and step forwards with the right. So reaching the fingertips tall, keeping your pelvis level with the front of the mat, so square to the front of the mat. We haven't opened up the back foot, so see if you can keep both toes pointing forwards, and that allows you to open up through the back left leg. So we're reaching tall without scrunching up around the ears. Soften and create a bit more space around the upper arm bones and ears. The gaze can be forwards. Soft bend into the front knee, making sure that the front knee doesn't drop in towards the midline. See if you can welcome it to cover more towards the middle of the foot. So you're bending the knee and it's travelling towards the centre two toes. Tuck in the tailbone, you're just going to bend your back knee and allow the pelvis to really come into a kind of anterior, opposite of the anterior. So it could be an anterior, a forwards tilt, where the tailbone is sticking out behind us. But we're actually going to tuck the tailbone by dropping the back knee, bending the knee, keeping the tailbone and the pelvis in that nice position, and then we're going to place the back foot down onto the floor again. You might find the tailbone has come away from being tucked, and that's absolutely fine. There's a little play with that. What we're doing here is opening up the left hip flexor, finding the fingertips reaching towards the sky then, keeping that position of the pelvis. As we create connection between the ribs on the front body and the two side bones of the pelvis, so we're not flaring through the front body, we're trying to find containment, almost like there's a cylinder wrapping around our core as the fingertips reach nice and tall, bending into the front knee. Good. And then we're just going to keep that bend into the front knee, then we're taking our hands around the rib cage, and then we're going to exhale and rotate towards our back foot with our hands. So the hips will stay where they are, towards the front, and then we'll just take the hands and open out the rib cage. So we're rotating towards our back foot just as far as we can without the right knee following. So the right knee stays where it is, and we might find that that's not very far at all, and that's absolutely fine. Once we've got to that place where we can just rotate the rib cage, we're then just going to open the arms out, turn the palms of the hands up, and find our way into a warrior two. And warrior two, this is a variation. It's not the traditional kind of variation. It's a variation that's really helpful for finding more rotation in the spine, because the pelvis is tracking forwards and the rib cage is moving back. So we get to explore how our breath can come into the lateral side ribs as we're extending the arms out. So it's kind of playing around with the posture. We don't have to kind of stay too solid here. We can invite a little bit of play into the shape. So you can maybe lean forwards through the rib cage and then back, keeping that bend in the front knee. And it's the same with the front knee here, making sure that it's not dropping in towards the midline. See if you can rest down into the baby toe side of your front foot. And reaching the arms nice and long. We're just going to step back, forwards to the top of the mat, and hinge into our
chair pose. So again, notice if the knees have dropped in towards the midline and see if you can keep the weight into the outer edges of the feet. And then exhale, folding forwards, deep bend in the knees. Make sure you let the head and the neck go. And loosen off if you feel the need to move and wiggle the pelvis. You can just let the spine respond to the breath. So taking a moment here to undo any kind of holding you might have found in that previous shape. And then exhale and soften into stillness. And when you're ready, dropping the weight through the feet, bending at the knees, sweeping the fingertips along the floor, reaching the fingertips towards the sky. So final chair pose again. This time we're going to lean into the left foot and step back through the right. So we're coming into warrior one pose on the left leg this time. So just taking the time to figure out what's going on here. You might notice how different this side feels. Maybe this back ankle is more restricted than the other side. And actually glancing at the back foot, you might notice how the toes naturally go out towards a sort of 3 o'clock position. Or maybe 2 o'clock, and see if you can play with that and invite the toes on the back foot to travel forwards as well. Notice what's happening through the pelvis. If we've automatically come into a really tipped forwards pelvis, then what we could do is just bend the knee like we did on the other side and tuck the tailbone so that we're exploring more of a kind of posterior tilt, backwards tilt, tailbone tucked, and then keeping that sensation of the front ribs drawing down and connecting to the front of the hip bones, and then reaching back through the right foot and allowing that to kind of play with planting down and collapsing. I always like to keep a little bounce, so hovering the heels off the floor a little to allow a bit of a bounce. And we're always playing with the hip flexors, so it's not a movement that we do a lot of. Most of our lives are spent into a deeper hip flexion rather than opening up the hip flexors. Unless we do a lot of running or extending through the hips, we're not there a lot, so it's quite tricky for us. So just seeing if you can tuck that tailbone and play with that, sweeping the fingertips up towards the sky. Then we're going to keep the feet where they are, keep the pelvis where they are. Hands come to the side ribs, and then as we exhale, we're going to walk the rib cage around towards your back foot. So the pelvis doesn't move, the knee still bends and comes into that right angle position or close enough to, and then the arms can extend once we've played with the position of where the rib cage can go to today without the pelvis moving. So the pelvis continually gets drawn back to centre, inviting the left femur into the left hip. And then as we exhale, maybe we can invite a bit more rotation to come from the centre spine behind the belly button. And we can extend the fingertips so that they open out through the collarbone. So there's almost this gracious kind of invitation of softness through the upper body as we stabilise into that balanced foundation. So these are all the foundation postures of the Scaravelli kind of approach. So stepping back to centre now, bringing the feet to the top of the mat. Just going to inhale, sweeping the hands up and softening through the knees, exhale, folding forwards and hinging. So this kind of really accessible way of working with the hips, hoping that we can open up just a little bit more with curiosity and just allowing the head and the neck to rest as you come into your forward fold. So it's kind of like an inquiry-based approach, this ability to just get curious about what's present in this moment. There's no sense of judgment, it's just curiosity. And each time we arrive on our mats, we have another opportunity to get curious. So I'm just going to invite you now to bend the knees deeply and sweep the fingertips forwards and up, finding a way back into a chair pose again. sitting a little deeper, resting into the heels. And then sinking through the floor, reaching the fingertips towards the sky. The feet are resting down as the arms draw down either side of you. Good. Okay, so we're just going to step wide on the mat now, coming into our wide-legged forward fold. So finding a way of hinging at the hips. So we're going to come onto the floor and do some more reclining postures in a moment with some twisting. But let's just see if we can find a bit more opening through the back of the legs. So when we come to our standing postures with balancing, it's a little bit easier. So you can grab your block or book or brick and place that in front of you. And we're going to take the toes and point them forwards so that the feet are in parallel, lifting and spreading the toes. We're just going to ground into the outer edges of the feet. And maybe walk the feet a little bit closer. If you're extremely flexible and mobile, your feet might be quite far apart, but just see if you can walk them a little bit closer in so that we're not too wide in our wide-legged forward fold. We want to work a little bit more into the hips rather than kind of dropping into the back of the legs. So we're going to take the hands to the hips and just sort of take the pelvis around in circles, maybe even some figure of eights. Just kind of checking in with the hip joints and feeling how they feel today. And once we've got that sensation within the hip joints, that we're really kind of aware of the ball and socket at the top of the femur, we're then going to take the pelvis and roll the pelvis over. So we're hinging at the hips with a nice long spine. So we're not collapsing through the upper back. We're going to hinge forwards as the sit bones draw back. And maybe then we can take the hands towards the block. So I'll just show you from the side. And what we want to do is really work on finding the movement coming from the hips. So rather than coming forwards and wanting to come forwards with kind of more energy from the upper back, we want to hinge at the hips. So you can even put a bend in the knees, sticking the sit bones and tailbone out behind you, hinging at the hips, keeping the upper back in line with the pelvis, so that we're coming forwards in one nice long line. You can keep bending the legs, and then eventually you'll find your way forwards into a nice horizontal position. And if you're not quite there, that's absolutely fine. You might just have more blocks underneath you, or you could even take the hands to the hips and play with a more upright position. That's absolutely fine as well. So when we get there, we can then find, wherever there is, we can explore. We want to find a long spine. So we can explore movement through the hips to allow the feet to stay awake. So we're not just collapsing through the feet. We want to lift and spread the toes and keep those inner arches and ankles awake. So one of the things about the Scaravelli yoga that's really lovely is this relationship to gravity. So once the body really is able to notice how supported it feels and how gravity kind of travels through the body, then it releases and let goes more. But if we're holding a lot of tension, then it can't really sense gravity. The nervous system can't feel that connection to the earth. And so it's constantly in this kind of being pulled away from being grounded. So see if you can sort of undo this shape. See if you can find playing between resting weight into the hands and then letting the legs extend as the feet sink through the floor on the exhale. So see if you can let that just be explored with the breath. I've dropped down my block to the second, and now I'm just going to take it to the lowest level so that I can play with sending the weight. I'm actually going to just remove my block and send the weight into my feet completely so that the fingertips are just sort of hovering. This really starts to wake up the whole of the legs. So my fingertips are hovering, the weight is travelling down through my legs, and see if you can really rest down through the heels and the ankles. On the exhale, you might then find the upper body, torso, spine is releasing down through the crown of the head as as you exhale. I'm just going to invite you to walk your fingertips now over towards your right ankle, lengthening through both legs, exhaling and softening on the exhale. Letting the feet really drop through the floor, then walk yourself back to centre and over to the other side. So we're finding those spaces that might be holding and gripping and seeing if we can let go, let the feet really ground so that the upper back and spine can release. Good. Walking back to centre, you're just going to take your hands to your hips and come all the way back up. Bending through the knees, keeping your spine nice and long. Okay, so let's now come down to the floor. I'm just going to drop my block to one side and find a belt. So if you've got a belt or a tea towel, bring that close by. We're coming down onto the floor just to find some seated work. So let's find our forward fold. And this is where you might want to use your blanket. So you could have a rolled up blanket, folded blanket, or a cushion to go underneath your pelvis. This is really helpful to help you find the sit bones. So just sweeping the flesh away from the buttocks so that your sit bones can really sit down and the buttocks are, the flesh away from your sit bones so that your sit bones can really ground down into the floor or into the blanket or cushion. And then we're going to sit nice and tall, so you'll naturally find as the sacrum starts to find that sort of vertical stacking and the spine comes out of the pelvis and the tall crown of the head reaches in the opposite direction. You'll find that naturally the belly almost draws back towards the spine to help support in this kind of universal engaged core. The two sit bones are drawing back and down as the heels and the ankles draw in the opposite direction. So you're really starting to find a nice stable base through both the heels and the ankles. And then we're just going to spread the toes, keeping them engaged, drawing the big toes back towards the shins, and then reaching the fingertips behind us, squeezing the shoulder blades together so that we're drawing them back and down, and lifting the heart space. And this is really starting to allow us to find a nice tall spine as we then begin to hinge forwards from the hips. So this is not coming forwards with the upper back in a collapse, similar to what I was explaining about with the forward fold with the wide legs. We want a nice tall spine. So eventually we can start to hinge forwards from the pelvis and the upper back will join, but the hinging is coming from the hips, not the upper back. Maybe the fingertips come either side of the knees or shins, or maybe you could find them coming either side of the ankles or even holding onto the toes. And so at some point you'll find that the upper back can round because we've already got as much of a hinge forwards from the hips as is available for us. And then that's a nice integrated curve through the upper back. So just exploring that, noticing whether the heels or the ankles have sort of collapsed, or if the feet can maybe stay a little bit more bright as the toes reach up towards the sky. Finding a nice deep breath in and a long breath out. Deep breath in and a long breath out. So just taking a moment to fold forwards to wherever feels comfortable. If the legs are really quite tight and not letting go, that's absolutely fine. We might find that bending at the knees is much easier for us to hinge forward at the hips with. And when we find that, then we've got an opportunity to really work with extending the heels in the opposite direction as the legs release. And really just listening into what the body needs. So we're never pushing and pulling, we're trying to allow the body to feel like we're creating the conditions to let go rather than pushing and pulling. So really coming into the forward fold with that sense of attentiveness and curiosity, and just letting yourself soften, letting the breath settle. And when you're ready, the next inhale will just come back up to sitting. And we're just going to find our belt. So we're going to begin working on our backs with our knees bent. So just drawing them back in towards the chest. And just finding one foot. So just dropping the right foot. We're going to take the belt around, or tea-towel if you're using a tea-towel, around the ball of the left foot. So finding your position first here with the bent right knee, reaching the left heel up towards the sky. The belt or tea-towel is in opposite hands, so we're in both hands on either side of the foot. And you're pressing the ball of the left foot up towards the sky. Now with that heel extended, so the left heel reaches up, you're then going to reach the right heel and scrub it along the floor. So we're going to end up with this kind of opposing action between the 2 feet, reaching out and reaching away. Taking a nice deep breath here, nice long arms. So we don't want bent elbows, we're not holding on and gripping with the hands. Just let the hands relax. So you're holding the belt, but we're not gripping and holding. And just allowing the head and the neck to really let go, the shoulder blades and collarbones to settle more towards the floor. Taking a couple of deep breaths here, allowing your right femur to really rest down and drop towards the floor. Good. And then we're just going to take the hands, so you're going to take the belt into the left hand and take the right hand onto the right hip. And then we're going to reach the left heel out towards the side. So you're just going to drop towards the left. Now, you may well be able to drop right over, but you might notice how the right buttock peels up off the floor. So see if you can play with where this left foot can go to without surrendering the grounding of your right hip. So we're really inviting ourselves to get kind of curious. You come back to center every time you go too far. And just allowing yourself to play and to loosen off. So when we go too far, we tend to pull out from the foot rather than working deep in the pelvis. So the invitation here is to come back into the hips and the pelvis and just find that sense of grounding as we reach and extend the left heel. Reach and extend the right heel. So they really travel in opposing directions away from the centre, but equally the femurs of both legs are travelling into the hips and really grounding and centering. This beautiful sense of balance within the shape. There's an extension and an expansion, and then also a centering and a contraction. And the breath is free to come and go, not holding the breath. And then when we are ready to come back to centre, we inhale and draw the leg back, so it's stepping just above the left hip. And then swapping the hands over. This time you're going to take your left thumb into your left hip crease and just draw that side of the pelvis down towards the bottom of the mat. And then reach the left ankle across the body over towards the right hand side. And it may go some distance, it may not go very far at all. It doesn't really matter. We're just kind of exploring more of a across the body shape, internal, across the body, across the midline. Okay, come back to centre. So let's just release the left foot and extend the heel along the mat and just feel the difference between the two sides. You might notice how one leg feels a lot longer. So let's do the other side. So let's draw both knees up, so feet flat on the floor, knees bent. And this time taking the belt around the right foot. And grounding down through the right hip. So making sure that we haven't shortened through the right hand side of the waist. Just Feel reaching towards the sky. Take the belt in the hands and then extend the heel up as you draw the big toe back towards the shin of the right leg. And then we're going to scrub the left heel this time along the mat. So reach, reach, reach. Find that extension so that we're reaching and opposing the two heels in opposite directions. Taking a deep breath, softening through the upper back and neck, so letting the head really relax so the whole spine feels supported from the back of the skull all the way down through the rib cage and all the way down through the pelvis, the back of the hips, and the left thigh bone is really relaxing and releasing down towards the floor. The front of the left hip is releasing as we press the heels away from one another. Now this time we're taking the belt into the right hand, left hand goes onto the left hip, and we begin the journey of the left ankle, left heel over to, right heel over towards the right. So this time you're maybe inviting a little bit more of the drawing of the right toe towards the right hand corner of the mat rather than just dropping out to the right. So there's almost lifting up. But notice as soon as we drop the leg over, how far we've gone and if we've rocked out of the grounding in the left hip. Come back to centre. So we're really inviting a release through the top of the right hip and thigh. And if we rush this, then it doesn't release. The body won't let go, it won't feel like it's been given the opportunity to let go. It will just kind of shove itself into the shape. But see if you can come away from that pushing and pulling and see if we can allow more of an undoing. Using the belt, using that kind of feedback from the belt to allow us to explore what that feels like. Noticing the breath, letting go of the head and the neck and letting that release and relax. And then when you're ready, coming back to centre, swapping over the hands, this time taking the right thumb into the right hip crease, just drawing that down towards the bottom of the mat as we explore taking the right heel, ankle over towards the left this time. So a nice active foot, so we don't just collapse through the foot. See if you can reach the heel and the ankle away from the hip as we ground down through the right hip. See if you can really ground down through both sides of the pelvis and feel that diagonal cross movement. Inhale, now come back to centre and release. Okay, so we're going to explore now coming back up to standing. So let's just take, before we do that, take the hands onto the knees and just take the knees around in some nice little circles. In fact, they might be quite big circles. So really starting to enjoy that sense of connection into the hip joints as we now roll over to one side, just moving your props. You might want the belt to hand actually, because you might need it. So you might need a chair. If you've got a chair close by and you're not sure about balancing, that's absolutely fine. Grabbing a chair or moving yourself closer to a wall is absolutely fine. So we're going to come into tree pose. So let's just ground down through Tadasana first. So just take a glance down at your feet and spread your toes. Let's see if we can find that really beautiful sense of grounding as we extend the fingertips down towards the floor, lifting and rolling the shoulder blades up and back. So there's a sense that the arms are just kind of reaching out of the shoulders, fingertips reaching down away from the wrists. And maybe even closing your eyes or softening the gaze. Let's just drop into the feet for a moment and feel the inhale as we tip forwards into the toes, and then as you exhale, really drop down into the heels. There's this beautiful sense of just gently rocking backwards and forwards, following the breath. And once we've found that connection through the feet with the breath, a soft little movement, doesn't have to be very big. You'll find this undulating rhythm coming through the body. So as the breath comes in We rock forwards. As the breath goes out, we drop down and ground through the heels. And then eventually just settling back to centre and finding the weight resting down just in front of the ankles. Noticing if we've collapsed through the feet and see if we can ground down through the baby toe side. So lifting and spreading the toes, really grounding down through the big toe mound, keeping that sense of grounding through the big toe mound as we lift the inner arch, the feet, as we rest down through the outer arch, the baby toe side, and then spreading the toes and letting them rest back down without dropping the ankles. So there's a sense that the heels really rest through the floor as the arch of the foot lifts, waking up through the ankles, the lower legs, lifting the muscles from the thighs onto the bones. So gently drawing the kneecaps up a little to engage through the legs without holding tension. You'll notice that little lift then through the pelvic floor, lifting up through the centre of the body here, reaching up as if there's a little plumb line from the centre of the pelvic floor up through the crown of the head and reaching tall. The heart centre lifts up and forwards as the fingertips extend down towards the floor and the crown of the head reaches up and back. So really settled here in Tadasana, mountain pose. And from here we're gently going to take the weight now into our left foot. And as we do this, you might want to grab hold of a back of a chair, or maybe it's absolutely fine today, maybe we can find our chair pose, standing without needing, not chair pose, our tree posture. So we can find tree balancing without needing the support. But it's absolutely fine. If we are at the wall, that's cool too. Just maybe taking a finger towards the wall rather than the whole hand, and allowing the support to be there for us with all of the props that we use, but without just kind of collapsing into it. So seeing if you can tentatively use the support of the chair or the wall if needed. And if you're coming into full tree pose, you might like to really focus on pressing through the thigh and pressing through the foot, so finding that sense of balancing in between this beautiful position where we can then take our fingertips towards the sky and grow those branches nice and tall from some deep rooted roots, grounding down through the foot, the standing leg. Don't worry if you fall, that's absolutely fine. You might even sway a little. It's also part of the process. Balance is not a place of rigidity. It is one of constantly giving and taking. And constantly finding oneness. Okay, so let's just come back to centre now. Taking the hands down the midline. Let's see if we can draw the knee back in and then step onto the other side. So you might want to just shake out that foot for a moment and find that sense of grounding between both feet. So lifting and spreading the toes, maybe even closing the eyes, rocking into the right foot this time, and carefully going to wherever you felt was right for you. So it may well be coming into the full tree pose, maybe this side is completely different. Just seeing if you can explore your variation for you today. It may help to fix your gaze, so drishti is our kind of gaze where we can fix our focal point. About 6 foot or something in front of us, not too close, not too far away. So the ability for us to then help ourselves balance by using the gaze. And maybe we can drift the arms up towards the sky as we root down through our standing leg foot. And finding that sense of connection through the sole of the foot and the upper thigh to help us create that stability and calm. Just beginning to observe the body as it readjusts and finds balance, as the breath is calm, gently arriving in the body, pausing at the top of the inhalation, and then allowing the exhalation to leave. And then when you're ready, calmly coming back to centre as much as you can with control coming out. Don't worry if it hasn't worked quite as well. Okay, so the last shape that we'll explore in this standing sequence is more of a crossbody. So this time, instead of taking one foot and using kind of like a centre line, we're going to come across the body and use the opposite hand on the foot. So just make sure that foot doesn't collapse. See if you can keep that I'm using my left foot, so keeping the left ankle engaged, so flexing the heel and allowing the heel to really reach away from you. And it might be that you're helping yourself to balance with using the back of a chair, but we're just going to start to sort of find this ability to balance on one foot with just holding the opposite foot and seeing if we can do that. So without collapsing or, kind of falling over. And then we can let that foot come down and maybe just come over to the other side. You might notice it's quite different on the other side, so it might be that this one isn't as mobile. This is my stiffer hip, and often it's more tricky to balance. But what we're doing here is just playing with the movement of the hip whilst we're in a balancing position. So you might then explore taking the heel and the ankle away from you and then coming back to centre. So I'm just going to play between side to side. I invite you to do the same. And what I'm going to do is turn to the side here so you can see. So as I come up into this posture, I have to bend my knee and allow my upper back to sort of curve a little. But then I'm going to take my spine as I grow my foot through the floor. My roots reach down, my crown of the head reaches nice and tall, and it's the foot that is going to kind of awaken the rest of this shape. So it's like we're finding tree pose by using the hand and the foot to create that sense of balance rather than the inner thigh. And you might find that you can just be there briefly and come to the other side, swapping over. So really allowing the foot that you're standing on to reach through the floor, and as it grows and drops through the floor, the crown of the head reaches nice and tall, and we find the ability for our hand holding on to our extended leg to become that balancing kind of place where we're really finding that opposing force, where we're extending the leg and dropping the standing leg through the floor as the crown of the head reaches tall, and then coming out whenever you're ready. The variation of that, of course, if you want to play with a slightly different variation, you can always use the strap, and I'll just show you that one here. And of course, because you're listening to this on a replay, you're welcome to pause and come back to this and practice a little further. So if you're using the strap, that might give you the ability to hold on to the foot with a little bit more space. So if you might have longer legs, I've got relatively short legs in comparison, so you might need the strap to hold on to your leg. So there's always a variation working towards a posture, whatever helps you get there, using the support you can. Okay, so let's just release down now, finding any extra layers. So we're coming towards our Shavasana. We're just going to find our way to a little supine twist. And I think I might be running out of battery. No, yeah, I might be running out of battery, so if that happens, then we'll have to say cheerio. It might just happen. So let's just find our little supine twist first, so allowing the spine to gently come down towards the mat as you rest on the floor. Drawing your knees in towards the chest. And just letting everything settle now. Taking a moment to let the hands really rest onto the knees and rocking from side to side. Letting the head release, so rocking the back of the head and the neck. And just letting everything settle. And then maybe just taking the knees over and dropping them towards the right as you extend the left arm out behind you as you turn your gaze over your left shoulder. So tucking the tailbone out behind you so you're finding a little kind of duck tail in the bottom of the spine, making sure your tailbone is not tucking underneath you. If the tailbone tucks underneath you and you draw your knees towards your chest, you might find that you can't actually invite much opening into a twist because the spine needs to have, it can't be in a flexion, a forward flexion to find a twist. It needs to have that curve in the lumbar spine to be able to release into a twist. So just taking the time to position where the legs are and playing with that so that you're not drawing the knees in towards the chest too much. But when you do finally find that position, letting the legs release towards the floor, so letting the upper leg drop down towards the lower leg. If you're twisting towards the left, then maybe taking the right hand on top of the left knee and just letting everything soften and relax. Taking a couple of breaths here, letting the head really relax and go. Letting the feet soften, so this really passive twist. Rotating along the spine. And then you're gently going to inhale, drawing the head back to center, drawing the knees in towards the chest. As you gather everything back in, this time we're just going to rock the knees over towards the left this time and allow the right arm to open out over your shoulder behind you. So again, playing with the position of the feet, you might like to have slightly more support underneath one knee, if that's helpful, to really allow the lower body to relax and release. Just seeing if you can maybe take the cushion between your knees as well as an option. Playing with keeping that little arch in the lumbar spine so that we're not tucking the tailbone. We're inviting a bit more space through the rib cage to let the ribs really soften around the spine. So your right fingertips release behind you. Back of the head relaxes and let's go. Taking a couple of deep breaths here. Allowing the spine to soften around into a spiral. Just letting everything feel that contact with the floor. And then on the next inhalation, just gently drawing your head back to center. And then slowly drawing your knees in, gathering everything back into center. Dropping the feet towards the floor. And then extending the heels, letting the arms drop down either side of the body, creating a bit more space between the upper arm bones and the rib cage. Taking your blanket, your eye pillow, and just allowing yourself here to really soften. So for the next few minutes, completely surrendering and letting go. Softening through the brow of the forehead.
across the bridge of the nose, maybe inviting a warm quality of light to emanate from the crown of the head across the skull. This warm kind of amber liquid, maybe like honey or nectar, coming across the forehead, softening and smoothing and smoothing out across the forehead, across the bridge of the nose, across the cheekbones, down around the base of the tongue, softening and smoothing any tension, releasing and relaxing on the tongue, the back of the head, the neck, the front of the throat. Begin to soften across the collarbones, out to the shoulders, from shoulders to fingertips, all the way back to the center chest, around the rib cage, employing this beautiful quality of warm light through the rib cage, down through the center chest, softening and relaxing through all of the lower belly organs, the pelvis, the fronts and the backs of the thighs. This warm, relaxing quality filling the lower limbs, spreading down through the heels and the ankles and out through the toes. So your whole body now completely enveloped in this cooling quality, calming, soothing. Allowing the breath to settle. Over the next few minutes, completely giving yourself permission to let go. Softening, surrendering. Just gently beginning to bring yourself back into your bodies now. Allowing yourself to come back up to sitting. And we'll just close our practice with one Om. So let's just sweep the arms down towards the floor as we reach the crown of the head nice and tall. So there's a sense that there's a nice comfortable spine. And then we're going to inhale, sweep the arms up, and exhale with Om. Bowing your head towards your heart, offering thanks for your practice and for sharing that with me today. So namaste. Thank you very much. I don't think we ran out of battery, so that's great. Thanks, guys.